My name is Miles. I turned 25 yesterday, and up until about 9 o'clock last night, the plan for my birthday had been exactly the same as every other year since I moved out. One frozen pizza, a six-pack I'd nurse slowly, and whatever game happened to be on TV. I live alone in a small, single-story house on a quiet cul-de-sac just outside Denver, the kind of neighborhood where people still put pumpkins on their porches in October and nobody blasts music after 10. I fix air conditioners and refrigerators for a living, nothing glamorous, just enough to keep the lights on and the old Tacoma running. The doorbell rang at 9:07 p.m. I figured it was the Amazon guy dropping off the filter I'd ordered, so I opened the door in sweatpants and the same t-shirt I'd worn to work. Except it wasn't Amazon, it was Vivian. She lives directly across the street, the house with the dark green shutters and the porch light that's always on, even when no one's home. I'd seen her plenty of times watering plants, pulling groceries from her car, waving politely when we both happened to be outside at the same time. But we'd never done more than exchange a, "Hey, how's it going?" She's 37, maybe 38. I only know because Mrs. Larson next door loves to talk. Tonight she was wearing a simple black dress that stopped just above the knee, a thin gray cardigan, and her hair was down for once, soft waves brushing her shoulders. In her hands was a bottle of red wine and the kind of half-smile that looked like it had taken her 10 minutes to decide to use. "Happy birthday, Miles," she said, voice low, almost amused. I blinked. "How did you?" "Mrs. Larson told half the block. She also told me you'd be alone." She lifted the bottle slightly. "I figured you might want something better than whatever's in your freezer." I laughed, more out of surprise than anything. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She paused, eyes flicking up to mine. "But I wanted to." There was a beat of silence, just the cold October air and the porch light flickering, the way it always does when it's about to burn out. I realized I was still holding the door half open like an idiot. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated for half a second, then crossed the threshold. I caught the faint scent of something warm, vanilla maybe, mixed with the night air clinging to her cardigan. She handed me the bottle and glanced around the living room. Couch, coffee table, a couple of empty beer bottles I hadn't bothered to recycle yet. Nothing fancy. "I won't stay long," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just wanted to say happy birthday in person." I set the wine on the counter and turned back to her. "Thank you, seriously, this is unexpected." She smiled again, smaller this time, almost shy. "You're welcome." Another silence. Not awkward exactly, but loaded. I rubbed the back of my neck. "So, where's my real present?" I meant it as a joke, light, something to cut the tension. Vivian tilted her head, eyes catching the dim light from the kitchen. "Maybe I already gave it to you," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "and you just haven't opened it yet." My heart slammed once, hard against my ribs. It wasn't the words. It was the way she said them, the way her gaze didn't waver, the way she stood 3 feet away but suddenly felt a whole lot closer. I swallowed. "Vivian." She gave a tiny shake of her head like she was stopping herself. "I should go." She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Without turning around, she added, "Being alone on your birthday isn't the same as wanting to be alone. I learned that the hard way." Then she looked back over her shoulder, just long enough for me to see something raw and unguarded in her eyes. "Good night, Miles." The door closed softly behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the bottle on the counter, the porch light still flickering through the blinds. The house felt different. Quieter, but not empty anymore. I didn't open the wine that night. I just kept replaying the way she'd said my name, like she'd been practicing it, and the way her voice cracked just slightly on the word maybe. Something had just walked into my life wearing a black dress and carrying a bottle of red, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be alone anymore either. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my own heartbeat still thumping from the night before. The bottle of wine sat unopened on the counter like evidence. I made coffee, stared out the kitchen window, and watched her house the way you watch a place you're not sure you're allowed to look at. The porch light was off. Everything looked normal. Nothing felt normal. Then I saw it. a small white envelope tucked under my welcome mat. No name, no stamp, just my address written in neat, slanted handwriting. I picked it up, already knowing who it was from. Inside was a single card. Thick paper, no picture, only 6 words in the same handwriting. Coffee tomorrow morning, if you dare. My pulse did that stupid thing again. I flipped the card over. On the back, smaller letters. 7:30. I'll leave the door unlocked. I spent the rest of the day trying to act like a functioning adult. Changed a compressor on an old fridge, burned my knuckle on a hotline, told my boss I was fine when he asked why I kept checking my phone. At 6:47 p.m., I caved and texted the only thing that felt safe. You sure about that coffee? The reply came 2 minutes later. I'm sure about a lot of things I haven't said yet. I didn't sleep much. At 7:28 the next morning, I stood on her porch in jeans and the least wrinkled flannel I owned, holding a box of donuts like a high school kid. The door was cracked open the way she'd promised. I knocked anyway. Come in, Miles. Her voice came from the kitchen. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled like coffee and something baking. She was at the stove, back to me, wearing an oversized cream sweater that slipped off one shoulder and gray leggings. Her hair was piled high in a messy knot, a few strands already escaping. She looked softer in the morning light, younger somehow and more dangerous. I wasn't sure you'd show, she said without turning around. I wasn't sure you meant it. She glanced over her shoulder then, and the small smile she gave me made the room feel 10 degrees warmer. Sit. Coffee's almost ready. I sat at the island. She slid a mug toward me, black, no sugar, exactly how I take it, then leaned against the opposite counter, cradling her own mug with both hands. So, I said, is this the part where you tell me last night was a mistake? Vivian studied me for a long second. Do you think it was? No. Good. She took a slow sip. Because I don't do mistakes twice. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't saying yet. I noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her fingers tightened around the mug like she was grounding herself. I don't usually invite people in, she said finally. Not for coffee, not for anything. I'm not people, she laughed under her breath. No, you're the guy who's been waving at me for 2 years and never once made it weird. I shrugged. I'm good at not making things weird. Until last night. Yeah, until last night. She set her mug down and walked around the island to the flickering pendant light above us. This thing drives me crazy, she said, reaching up on her toes. It's been blinking for weeks. Every time it does, I think of my ex. Here when you don't want him, gone when you need him. I stood. Let me look. She stepped aside. I grabbed the small toolbox I'd brought just in case, old habit, and climbed onto the stool. Loose connection, easy fix. I tightened the wire, replaced the bulb with one I'd grabbed from my truck on the way over. When I flicked the switch, the light came on, steady and warm. Vivian watched me the whole time. When I climbed down, she was closer than I expected. Close enough that I could see the faint freckles across her nose I'd never noticed before. Thank you, she said quietly. Anytime. Our hands brushed when she handed me the screwdriver back. Neither of us moved away. Her fingers lingered against mine, warm, a little hesitant. I felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm decides which way it's going to break. Miles, she started, then stopped. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I like being here. She looked up at me, eyes searching. I like you here too. That's the problem. It doesn't have to be a problem. She gave a small, sad smile. Everything good feels like a problem when you're scared of losing it. I didn't have an answer for that, so I just nodded and we finished our coffee standing side by side at the counter, shoulders almost touching, talking about nothing and everything. Her job in communications, the client who still emailed at midnight, my week of emergency calls because of early snow, the way the mountains looked this morning. When I left an hour later, she walked me to the door. Her hand brushed my arm, light, deliberate. Tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow, I said. And just like that, coffee at Vivian's became the best part of my day. Some mornings I brought donuts, some mornings she had muffins fresh from the oven. We never talked about what we were doing, we just did it. Texts turned into habits. Good morning. Still on for coffee? Always. One morning she opened the door still in pajamas, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. I didn't ask why. I just made the coffee stronger and sat with her on the couch until the sun came up properly. Another morning she burned the toast and laughed at herself for 10 straight minutes while I fixed it. And every time our hands brushed, passing the sugar, reaching for the same mug, fixing something else that needed fixing, neither of us pulled away. The mornings blurred into weeks. Coffee at Vivian's became as natural as breathing. Some days we talked the whole time. Some days we just sat on opposite ends of her couch, legs stretched out, reading our phones in comfortable silence. I learned the way she took her coffee when she was tired. Extra milk, no sugar. The way she chewed her bottom lip when she was thinking. The way her laugh started soft and then spilled out all at once when something really got her. October turned into November. The aspens dropped their last gold leaves, and the first real snow threatened every night on the forecast. One Thursday, the sky was the color of wet concrete when I left her place at 8:30. She stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Text me when you get home," she said, same as always. 3 houses away, I reminded her. Still. I smiled. "Yes, ma'am." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling too. That afternoon, the sky finally opened. Not snow, rain, heavy, wind-driven, the kind that turns streets into rivers and makes people cancel plans. I was elbow deep in a refrigerator condenser when my phone buzzed. "Vivian, still need to mail that package for work. Post office closes in an hour. I'm an idiot for waiting this long." "Miles, want company?" 3 dots. Then, "I'd like that." I finished the call, threw on a dry jacket, and jogged across the street. She was waiting under the porch with a small box and the tiniest umbrella I'd ever seen. "That thing's useless," I said. "It's decorative," she shot back, but she was already laughing. We walked the 6 blocks to the post office, sharing the pathetic umbrella, shoulders bumping every time the wind shifted. By the time we got there, we were both soaked anyway. She mailed her package. I bought us 2 terrible vending machine hot chocolates. On the way back, the rain eased into a steady drizzle. Halfway home, the wind picked up again. A gust flipped the umbrella inside out. Vivian yelped, more surprised than upset, and I reached over to pull her collar up against the cold. My fingers brushed the skin at the base of her neck, warm, wet, alive. She went very still. I started to pull away, but she caught my wrist. Not tight, just enough to keep my hand there. "You're always doing that," she said quietly. "Doing what?" "Taking care of things, of people, of me." I shrugged, rain dripping off my hair. "Somebody has to." She looked up at me. Water clung to her lashes, a single drop hung on the curve of her lower lip. I wiped it away with my thumb without thinking. Her breath hitched. "Miles, I'm right here." "I know." Her voice cracked on the second word. "That's what scares me." We were standing under a dripping maple tree half a block from home, getting soaked, and neither of us moved. "I like this," she said. "I like us. And I haven't let myself like anything in a really long time." "I like us too." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, they were glassy, not from the rain. "I'm terrified of needing you," she whispered, "because needing people is how you end up broken." I took the ruined umbrella from her hand and let it drop to the ground. Then I took both her hands in mine. They were freezing. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Not because you need me, because I want to be here." "There's a difference." She stared at me like she was trying to find the lie and couldn't. "I'm 37, she said, voice raw. "You're 25. People will... I don't care about people. I care that you'll wake up one day and realize you settled. I'm not settling, I'm choosing." Another gust of wind whipped rain across our faces. She shivered hard. I stepped closer, close enough that our jackets touched. "Vivian," I said, "I don't need you to promise me forever. I just need you to not push me away when it feels good." She searched my face for a long moment. Then, so softly I almost missed it. "I don't know how to do this without being afraid." "That's okay," I told her. "We'll be afraid together." She let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for years. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine. We stood like that in the rain, breathing the same cold air until her shivering got too bad to ignore. "Come on," I said, picking up the broken umbrella. "Let's get you dry." We walked the last block in silence, fingers loosely tangled. When we reached her porch, she didn't let go of my hand right away. "Tomorrow?" she asked. Same as always, but different now. "Tomorrow," I said. She squeezed once, then disappeared inside. I crossed the street to my own house, soaked to the bone and grinning like an idiot. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in a long time it didn't feel cold. The first real storm didn't come from the sky. It rolled up in a black Audi Q7 on a Friday evening just after 6. I was on my porch unlacing my muddy boots when the car parked crooked across Vivian's driveway, blocking her garage. The driver's door opened and a tall guy in an expensive coat stepped out like he still owned the deed to the house. Nathan. I'd never met him, but I knew the face from the single-framed photo Vivian had turned backward in a drawer she thought I wouldn't open. He looked older than the picture now, salt in his hair, jaw tight with the kind of anger that's been simmering for years. He didn't knock. He pounded. Vivian opened the door fast, probably thinking it was me. I saw her shoulders lock the second she realized who it was. "What are you doing here?" Her voice carried across the quiet street. Nathan didn't lower his volume. "I heard some interesting rumors, Viv. Thought I'd see for myself if my ex-wife lost her mind or just her standards." I stood up slowly, boots forgotten. My pulse hammered in my ears. Vivian stepped onto the porch, pulling the door almost shut behind her. "Leave." "Not until you tell me it isn't true." He jerked his chin toward my house. "The kid who fixes refrigerators, really?" I was already moving, crossing the street without deciding to. Vivian saw me coming and her eyes went wide, a quick shake of her head that said, "Stay back." I stopped at the edge of her lawn. Nathan noticed me then. His smile was thin and ugly. "Oh, perfect. Here he is. How old are you, son? 23, 24? 25, I said. He laughed once, sharp. "Cute. You know she used to change my kid cousin's diapers, right?" Vivian's voice cut like ice. "Get off my property, Nathan." "Our property until you bought me out with my own money," he snapped. Then softer, poisonous. "You can do whatever you want, Viv. Just don't pretend it's love. It's a midlife crisis with a tool belt." I took one more step. "You heard her. Leave." He sized me up like I was the appliance he was deciding whether to kick. "Stay in your lane, kid." Vivian moved between us, palm flat against my chest to keep me back. Her hand was shaking, but her voice wasn't. "Nathan, go, now." He held her stare for a long second, then shrugged like it wasn't worth his time. "Fine, enjoy your little fantasy. Just remember, fantasies end." He climbed back into the Audi and peeled out, leaving rubber on the asphalt. Vivian stood frozen until the taillights disappeared. Then her knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the porch steps. "I'm sorry," she kept saying over and over, like it was her fault he existed. I got her inside, sat her on the couch, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She wouldn't look at me. "He's not wrong," she whispered finally. "People will say worse." "Let them. You don't know what it's like." "I don't care." She laughed, a broken sound. "You will." That night, she didn't ask me to stay. I didn't anyway. I sat in my truck across the street until her lights went out at 2. The next morning, the flyers appeared. Cheap photocopies taped to every mailbox and streetlight in a 3-block radius. A blurry photo of Vivian and me on her porch 2 weeks ago, my hand on her waist, her head tilted toward mine. Underneath, in bold, "Guess some people really do trade down." I ripped down everyone I found. So did Mrs. Larson, surprisingly fast for 78. By noon, the damage was done. Phones were buzzing. Curtains twitched when I walked to my truck. Vivian didn't answer her door, didn't answer texts. Her car never moved. I left coffee on her porch every morning anyway. It went cold. Day 3, I heard her crying through the open window when I mowed my lawn. Day 5, her office called my phone looking for her. She hadn't shown up or answered emails. Day 7, I came home from work and found her sitting on my front steps, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red and swollen. "I turned off my phone," she said before I could speak. I can't look at people. I can't breathe in my own house. I sat beside her. The street was empty, but it didn't feel like it. I'm ruining your life, she said. You're not. I am. You just don't see it yet. I took her hand. She tried to pull away. I didn't let her. Vivian, look at me. She did, barely. I'm still here. That's not changing because some asshole printed lies on cheap paper. She started crying again, silent tears that broke something in my chest. I pulled her against me and held on until she stopped shaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. I think I need to be alone for a while. I nodded, even though it felt like swallowing glass. Okay. She stood up, wiped her face with the sleeve of my hoodie she was still wearing from 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, Miles. Then she walked back across the street and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch until the sky turned gray, staring at her dark windows, waiting for a light that never came on. 8 days after she shut the door, I came home from a long call in Boulder, hands still smelling of refrigerant, shoulders aching from hauling a compressor up 3 flights of stairs. The street was quiet. Early evening, first real snow of the season starting to fall in lazy, fat flakes. I was halfway up my walk when I noticed the small box on Vivian's porch. Not mine, hers. Plain brown cardboard, no label, sitting right in front of her door like it belonged there. I knew before I even crossed the street. Inside the box was a new light bulb, the warm white kind she likes, a fresh bag of the Ethiopian beans we always brewed, and a single folded note in my handwriting, the same note I'd left with the cold coffees she never opened. If you still want to share coffee, don't pull your hand away again. I'd written it the first night she stopped answering. I'd left 6 more copies. She'd kept this one. Her front door opened before I could knock. Vivian stood there in jeans and the same oversized cream sweater from our first morning, hair loose, eyes red but steady. Snowflakes melted on her lashes the second she stepped outside. You kept it, I said, holding up the note. I kept all of them. Her voice was rough from disuse. I just wasn't brave enough to open the door. I didn't move. I'd waited 8 days. I could wait 8 more seconds. She looked past me at the street, at the curtains that weren't twitching for once, at the snow starting to cover the last torn flyer someone had missed. Everyone's still looking, she said. Yeah, and you're still here. Yeah. She took 1 step down the porch, then another, until she was close enough that I could smell coffee on her breath and cold air on her skin. I thought if I disappeared long enough, you'd realize this was too much trouble, she said. I'm not that smart. A small laugh escaped her, half sob, half relief. She reached out, fingers brushing the sleeve of my jacket, testing. I missed you, she whispered. So much it scared me more than the rumors. I caught her hand, held it against my chest. I missed you too. Snow kept falling, soft and silent, covering everything ugly. Vivian looked up at me, eyes shining. Coffee tonight? Already ground the beans in my head. She smiled, real this time, the kind that reached every corner of her face. Then she rose on her toes and asked, so quietly I felt it more than heard it, can I kiss you? Not because it's your birthday, just because I want to. I didn't answer with words. I leaned down and kissed her right there on the porch while the snow fell around us, slow and deliberate, like the world had finally decided to mind its own business. Her lips were cold at first, then warm, then certain. When we pulled apart, her forehead stayed against mine. Stay, she said. I'm not going anywhere. She took my hand, led me inside, and closed the door behind us. The new bulb was already glowing steady in the kitchen, the coffee maker hissing to life. She poured 2 mugs without asking how I wanted mine. We drank them standing at the counter, shoulders touching, watching the snow pile up against the window. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then she set her mug down, turned to me, and laced her fingers through mine. The best gift, she said, wasn't the wine. It was you still standing here when I gave you every reason to leave. I squeezed her hand once. I opened it, I told her. 8 days ago. She laughed, soft, and rested her head against my arm. Outside, the street disappeared under fresh snow, quiet and clean. Inside, the light stayed on, steady and warm, and for the first time in a long time, neither of us was alone.